climate neutral.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Ambassador and Youth Dialogue is about to be Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the Ambassadors and Youth Dialogue. My name is Rana Airlani, and it is an honor to be your host today. A very warm welcome to all the ambassadors of the EU member states and Ibu Laxmi, the Director General for Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, our brilliant youth speakers, our guests here at Ayana Hotel, and those attending online through Zoom and YouTube. Thank you for attending this event this afternoon. The Ambassadors and Youth Dialogue is a partnership between the EU delegation to Indonesia and Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. It is one of the activities under the EU Climate Diplomacy Week 2022, which aims to foster cooperation, dialogue, and also inspire real actions to tackle the climate change. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Ambassador of the EU to Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piquet, to deliver his opening remarks. Ambassador Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Excellency, Ibu Laxmi Dewanti, the Director General of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, colleague ambassadors of the EU member states, very great to see you this afternoon. And lastly, but in a way, is firstly, colleagues from Indonesia, particularly the many young people that I see in the room. Great to have you here this afternoon in this rather chilly meeting room, but I'm sure that our atmosphere and dialogue will be very warm. Climate change is here. We see phenomena proving this all over the globe, including in Europe, where this summer was the summer with the hottest recorded temperatures in our history. Many forest fires, many excess deaths in many of our member states. Our rivers were running low, and that, of course, causes major problems for agriculture, for crop irrigation, as well as for power production. Summer heat has become a fairly regular feature on the European continent, and I think we must accept the science showing that this phenomenon is human-caused. Climate change is not the only problem we face. There are, in fact, 3 planetary crises going on at the same time. Besides climate change, there's air pollution, and there is biodiversity loss, and all 3 threaten our Mother Earth. And our lives depend on nature, from the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. And our economy also runs on nature. Climate and biodiversity crises are threatening the very foundations of our life on Earth. Moreover, of course, as you know, we have a non-climate related crisis in Europe going on, namely the Russian war on Ukraine. And why do I mention it? Not, of course, first of all, because this is in totally unjustified attack against a sovereign country and a breach of all the principles of the UN Charter and a total disregard of the rights of an independent state. But the main point I wanted to make, it has to do with energy, and because Russia is using energy as a weapon against us. It threatens Europe, and indirectly it threatens the whole entire global economy. What do we do about it? In the EU, we have decided to turn away from Russian gas. A couple of different ways. First of all, source gas from elsewhere, from reliable partners. And secondly, by pushing ahead faster on our climate action track, on pushing renewable energy and on energy saving, which is a must for us in order to get through the current winter. And of course, as you know, saving energy is the cheapest, the safest and the cleanest way to address the current energy crisis. And it's very simple. We can contribute to that ourselves, myself, the other ambassadors here, and everybody else. Saving depends on your personal conduct, your personal behavior. But as I said, in the medium to long term, we want to scale up our investments in renewable energy, and which is now become the cheapest and clean. It can be generated domestically, and it can transform our societies to a greener and sustainable future. All this happens in the framework of the EU's big climate policy, aiming to make us carbon neutral by the year 2050. Our policy is called the Green Deal. You will hear about it today, and it will be implemented through various phases, with 2030 being the first big milestone. We want to be minus 55% down on our CO2 production. Action in the economy is one, but also action in the public space. And here we come to young people. Here we come to the EU Climate Diplomacy Week in Indonesia. Young people play the key role in our future. That is true for Europe, that's true for Indonesia. And they are the main actors to mobilize transformative change. And it's the time to make the voices of young people, your voice, time to make them heard and to act towards a promising post-pandemic society and sustainable future. Climate Diplomacy Week of the EU in Indonesia. We're very proud of this activity. That's why it's called a week, but in fact it is 12 days. And we kicked it off 2 weeks ago when we picked litter and we were jogging along Jalan Sudirman here in Jakarta, and we did the same in Bali. And just this one activity collected more than 500 kilograms of waste, and we reached out to 600 young people on dealing with waste and plastics and recycling. Last Friday, a week ago, we had a one-day conference where we discussed the latest achievements of Europe and Indonesia cooperation on clean energy transition, sustainable transportation, and the private sector contribution on energy efficiency, with many stakeholders from all around the economy, as well as NGOs and civil society stakeholders. And today we're going to discuss the efforts that the EU and EU member states have done to tackle climate change at home, climate change, biodiversity loss, the energy crisis we're facing now. All together with the ambassadors from the member state, we have a number of excellencies here in the room, and I'm sure you will enjoy what they have to contribute. I hope that the dialogue we're having will provide you some insights from our success stories, and that it will inspire you to take action. This is the one but last day in our Climate Diplomacy Week. Tomorrow is the very last, the concluding event, right here in Jakarta in the Gelora Bung Karno. in the softball park there. Some of you will know it. I hope that many of you will join in tomorrow afternoon to enjoy the green theme movie screening. We will have a music performance and a prize awarding ceremony from the various competitions that we have run throughout this year's Climate Diplomacy Week. I close there with this an invitation and with the wish that we will enjoy this dialogue and that it will help all of us cooperate more in voicing our response to climate change together and build the climate resilient future for our society and for our economy. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. This is Dino Patijalal, Chairman and Founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, the largest foreign policy group in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. And I'm very glad that this week FPCI is working with the EU delegation to celebrate EU Climate Diplomacy Week. And I want to send my regret for not being able to join you in person there, although my heart is always with this event, given the importance of climate change to FPCI cause issues, especially this year. And I want to say hello also to our good friend Vincent, who is always very supportive of FPCI. And I want to also say hello to the EU member states ambassadors who are participating at today's Youth Climate Dialogue, Ambassador Marina of Sweden, Ambassador Lambert of Netherlands, Ambassador Ina of Germany, Ambassador Yaroslav, Lila, Frank, Mr. Stefan, and Diego, and of course the entire FPCI family, our FPCI university chapters, and also partner organizations of the FPCI Climate Unit. Let me just say this, on climate change, thank God there's EU. Yeah, I repeat, on climate change, thank God there's EU. Why do I say this? Because climate change is something that needs leadership if we are to achieve climate security. And the EU has been the most progressive region in terms of the climate agenda. I think I'm not overstating that fact. EU has established very ambitious plans for 2030 reduction and also for mid-year net zero targets. And not only that, EU is not just having a plan, but turning it into law and making sure that all the EU countries are aligned in terms of their economic and social policies to achieve their common net zero targets. But beyond that, EU is also, in terms of climate diplomacy, always driving the process, always encouraging others to go faster, to become more ambitious, and always willing to take more risks and with great energy to achieve the objectives of climate security, which we must say is not guaranteed. It's still a volatile and uncertain process with no guarantee that we are indeed at the end of the road going to achieve the 1.5 degree world that Paris Climate Treaty has called for. Right. So kudos for EU. I'm really glad that you are there and that you are leading the climate agenda, and you are also extending cooperation to countries around the world to achieve this, but especially to Indonesia. And for the government of Indonesia, FPCI wants to commend you for the announcement of the recent submission of your NDC to the UNFCCC, where Indonesia increased emission reduction target from 29% to 31.89% unconditionally. I like that term, unconditionally, and also from 41% to 43.20% with international assistance. Obviously, FPCI have been calling for increase and more ambitious emission reduction target for Indonesia, and this is certainly a step in the right direction. And I know that this is an ambition that will be enhanced, continuously enhanced and strengthened and upgraded in the coming years. But basically, congratulations to the Indonesian government. I hope we are going to have a dynamic discussions today. The young people are who are taking part in this discussion are in fact our champions and our best hopes for climate agenda or for the climate efforts that we are trying to achieve. Ask a lot of questions. Don't take any assumptions for granted. Question everything. And I hope from this discussion today that we can have not just raise awareness on climate agenda, but also a greater cooperation between EU and Indonesia, and also with the young people at the forefront of these climate efforts. Yeah. With that, I wish you a fruitful, fun, and dynamic town hall. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Ibu Laksmi Dewanti, Director General for Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, to say a few words. Ibu Laksmi, the floor is yours.
So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May Allah mercies and bless upon us. A very good afternoon. His Excellency, EU Ambassador to Indonesia, Mr. Vincent Piquet, Excellencies Ambassadors, distinguished participants, youth communities, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Minister of Environment and Forestry, I would like firstly to congratulate the EU for convening the EU Diplomacy Week 2022 with a very interesting topic on climate, nature, and biodiversity, and with the very important stakeholders, youth. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, youth communities, Decision 1 of CMA3 back in Glasgow acknowledges the important role of youth, together with indigenous people, local communities, civil societies, and children, in addressing and responding to climate change and highlighting the urgent needs for multi-levels and cooperative actions, and in contributing to progress toward the goals of the Paris Agreement. His Excellencies, distinguished participants, I couldn't agree more than what Ambassador Piquet said, that youth engagement is crucially important for environment and climate sustainability agenda. Ministry of Environment and Forestry has engaged youth in many activities since a decade ago, since a couple years ago especially. Taking into account its potential to create or participate in environment and climate actions, its unique characters on presenting bolder, creative, and innovative ideas, and equipped by high mobility and accessibility, youth is undoubtedly a driver for changes. As individuals, members of family, members of community, youth has a position to decision-making process toward more environmentally and climate-friendly conscious lifestyle. For example, there are many initiatives and activities such as related to waste reductions, including preventions or reducing of food waste, energy efficiency, tree planting, river cleanup, and many other actions. This year, as part of the G20 Indonesia presidency, Ministry of Environment and Forestry has been supporting the Youth 20, Y20, in their deliberations on the environment and climate sustainability agenda. And it's very remarkable, the action from the youth. So, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues, Indonesia has tremendous natural capital with two main resources on forestry and energy. The better we protect the forests and watershed, enhance the use of renewable energy, apply for energy efficiency, and control water and air pollutions, the lower impact on environment, greenhouse gas emission, and vulnerability. Indonesia has interlinked its policy on climate with nature and biodiversity through its sisters in Rio Conventions, namely UNFCCC for Climate Agenda, CBD for the Biological Diversity Agenda, and the UNCCD for combating the desertification and land degradations, and together with the Sendai Framework Disaster Risk Management. As has mentioned by Bapak Dino Patijala, with regard to the climate change agenda, an enhanced NDC has been submitted to the UNFCCC last week. The enhanced NDC reflect raising ambition by increasing target from 29% to 31.89% unconditionally, and from 41% to 43.2% conditionally. This enhanced NDC is the transition toward Indonesia's second NDC, which will be aligned with the long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilience 2050. Furthermore, I just would like to underline that under Indonesian NDC, the agenda of strengthening climate resilience regard as equally important than the reducing the greenhouse gas emission itself. So I just would like to say that do not forget that we also need to build our climate resilience while reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Some existing policies also shows these interlinkages, such as on the REDD Plus, as promulgated under the ministerial decree of Ministry of Environment and Forestry, covers not only reducing emissions from deforestations and forest degradations, but also the role of conservation, sustainable management of forests, and enhancements of forest carbon stock, as plus is identified under the REDD Plus. In addition, current policies Indonesia follow Net Sink 2030, direct actions on greenhouse gas emission reduction from reducing deforestation, sustainable forest management, peatland restoration, afforestation, reforestation, plantations, and water management, but also indirect action on ecosystem services, law enforcement, social forestry, as well as combating the forest and land fires. So, distinguished excellencies, participants, youth communities, I would like to challenge the participations of youth in scientific levels, as both climate and biodiversity refer to science-based findings and recommendations, both from the IPCC and IPBES. More innovative researchers, I believe, could be created by youth. The other challenge for youth is on concrete climate and nature actions in collaborations with communities and other non-party stakeholders, namely local governments, academia, CSO, and other non-party stakeholders. Such actions could strengthen and provide a feedback and inputs to the government. So to end, distinguished delegates, excellencies, youth communities, as this event is facilitating a dialogue between the ambassador and youth, I do hope that we could listen further on views and aspirations of youth in this engagement in more concrete way. So I wish the dialogues will be a successful and fruitful one. I thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ibu Laksmi. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now proceed to the Ambassadors and Youth Dialogue on advancing EU-Indonesia Actions on climate, nature, and biodiversity. We are honored to be joined by 10 ambassadors and deputies this evening. Ambassador of the EU to Indonesia, His Excellency Vincent Piquet. Welcome. Ambassador of Belgium to Indonesia, His Excellency Frank Felix. Deputy Head of Mission of Denmark to Indonesia, Per Brixen. Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia, Her Excellency Ina Lepel. Deputy Head of Mission of Spain to Indonesia, Diego Santiago Rivero. Head of Cooperation Department of France to Indonesia, Stefan Dovert. Ambassador of Hungary to Indonesia, Her Excellency Lila Karsai. Ambassador of the Netherlands to Indonesia, His Excellency Lambert Grins. Ambassador of Slovakia to Indonesia, His Excellency Jaroslav Klebo. And last but not least, Ambassador of Sweden to Indonesia, Her Excellency Marina Berg. And please also welcome our moderator, Esther and Estamara, Director of the FPCI Climate Unit.
Thank you so much to the MC, Rana, for the kind introduction. And I'd like to say welcome again on behalf of FPCI and EU to this Ambassadors Youth Dialogue, protecting climate, nature, and biodiversity. I hope that my voice is okay, perfect. So as Ambassador Vincent has mentioned earlier, this is such a distinguished panel. We have a lot of excellencies here, and I also like to see that there are many colorful jackets in the room. That means a lot of universities are participating. So hopefully everybody here can ask dynamic and fun questions, but most importantly, learn about what are some of the climate and sustainability initiatives that the EU member states has taken, and what can we learn from them. So before we move forward, a few housekeeping rules I'd like to remind to everyone. For the youth who will be asking a question, please introduce yourself, state your name, where are you from, which institution do you represent, and to which ambassador do you wish to direct your question to. So with that, may I please welcome the first youth participant to ask the question. Please stand up and approach the mic in the center.
Hi, everyone, excellent ambassadors, all the other participants. My name is Nimbade Emabeti Jakarta. I am an 18-year-old climate activist. I used to be a part of Biodiversity Protection Jakarta, Mari Kita Bahas, and Jedai Iklim. But to focus on school, I have stepped down from all of those. I would like to ask a question to the ambassador, Mr. Pickett. With the EU with the EU Green Deal and Indonesia recently with an enhanced NDC and long-term strategy, how do you think the EU and Indonesia could cooperate further in the future to achieve each respective climate commitment? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And cooperation is what climate action is all about. So you hit with your question, you hit the nail on the head. What can we do between Indonesia and us? I think a lot of practical know-how exchange. EU has been working on climate matters, I think, for about four decades now, 3 decades very seriously. So we have an awful amount of know-how around and available at government level, but also at civil society and company level. And that's what we can bring to Indonesia. Example, emission trading, carbon pricing. We've been doing that in Europe for 30 years. System works. It has had its ups and downs, but it does work. And it has generated a lot of funding, private sector funding for investment in carbon neutral equipment and installations. So that's one example that we can, can share. The second example I would mention is the forest. You all know better than I how rich Indonesia is as regards forest, and forest use is vitally important to do it well. Not the practices of the past, but do it in a sustainable way, and we see that take shape rather rapidly in Indonesia, and that's very much an agenda we would like to stimulate.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Ambassador Vincent. I've been notified that there's a second asker. If I can invite them to please approach the mic.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It is quite an honor for me to be able to stand here and deliver a question to one of the ambassadors here. My name is Zoltan Jenny. I am the president of FPCI Chapter of Veteran Jakarta, and my question will be directed to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Netherlands Indonesia, Mr. Lambert Heinz. I would like to ask about the Blue City, which is known worldwide as an icon for circular economy. My question would be, how did Netherlands manage to incentivize, or rather motivate, the business players or startups to play a role or contribute in reaching the sustainability goals? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, a very relevant question. First of all, let me thank the moderator for allowing me to be amongst one of the first speakers, because I have to apologize, I have to leave a bit early. And thank you for being here, for showing your commitment and engagement to the issue of climate change, to you, but also to all the others who are here. Climate change is not something which is happening in other countries or far away or tomorrow. No, it's about here and now. It's about us, and it's about the question, what can I do? What can I do personally to mitigate or to reduce the effects of climate change? So thank you very much for your personal commitment. Very, very rewarding. Now, on this question, the question is basically about circular economy. Let me say a few words about that first before I go into more detail on your question. When we speak about circular economy, basically it's about production, consumption, which leads to waste. The problem here is we have too much waste. Here in Indonesia, very clearly, look at the beaches of Indonesia, but we also see it in the Netherlands, in Europe, everywhere. We have too much waste. So what shall we do? Basically, there are two things we should do. The first thing is maybe consume less. Very hard. We never have discussions about less. It's always about more. But think about it, maybe we should consume less. The other thing we can do, and which we are doing, is consume differently. That has to do with different products and the way we are organizing our societies. Now, that's more general about circular economy. So the idea of circular economy, of course, is that the waste in the end will be used for our production processes. That makes it circular. So how does that work? Well, I think in many, many countries we have examples where this already works. I think Europe, thank you very much, Dino Patijalal, for your very kind words. You see indeed in Europe, many countries are working hard on circular economy, including my own country, the Netherlands. You mentioned the example of Blue City. It's actually not a literal blue city, but it's a project in Rotterdam, the city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, where indeed people, especially young people, come together to produce a circular economy within that city. And Rotterdam is interesting because I think, like most European cities, they have announced a target. In the case of Rotterdam, their target is to be completely circular, to have a circular economy in the year 2030. Think about that. That is only 8 years from now. What does it mean? It means that they will be completely waste-free. They will be running on sustainably produced and renewable materials. So in order to achieve that, 8 years from now, they really have to be very innovative, and they need everyone to help make realize that goal. Waste-free means that you have to reduce waste in the first place, and then the waste which is available be circulated and recycled and reused into products. Now, for the Netherlands as a country, our ambition is a bit lower. We say as a country we want to be completely circular in the year 2050, which still is quite ambitious because it's only 28 years from now for us as a country. Now, there are many ways to get there. Your question is about what can a government do. Basically, it's a complicated question because governments do things which do not have a direct impact. But think about, for instance, the important effect of taxes. As a government, we are very good in raising taxes, especially in Europe. But think about, for instance, the tax deduction or reduction on electrical vehicles. It's relatively cheap to buy an electric vehicle in the Netherlands. So most new cars which are being sold in the Netherlands are electric. It's a matter of economy. It's cheaper to buy an electric car. The other thing is solar panels. The electricity which we get from solar panels on our roof, the roof of our own house, is cheaper than the electricity we get through the normal grid. I also have solar panels on my house because of the subsidy which I received from my municipality. So there are two examples. The other example is regulation, laws, rules. One concrete example is that the Ministry of Electricity, so to say, in the Netherlands, has made it possible for my solar panels the electricity is going into the grid, right? So if my solar panels produce more than what I need, I'm being paid by the municipality, right? In Indonesia, that's not yet the case. That's why solar panels here are not yet popular. But the moment PLN says, okay, you get your solar panel into the grid, then it will be maybe interesting for people here to install solar panels. Now, there are many, many, many other examples which I can give, but most of them deal with contributions by the government on investment, on environmentally friendly investments or investments dealing with circular economy. That's about big money. And to be honest, I'm not talking about the private sector, about household level, but the real impact is being achieved within the industry and the private sector. In circular economy, for instance, I think, where is this figure? I wrote it down somewhere. I think 80% of our treated waste, 80% of our treated waste is being recycled, which is, it looks like it's very high percentage, 80%, 80. But it means that 20% of the waste, the treated waste, is not being recycled, not yet. And it's very hard to get there, to get to the 100%. The easiest part to recycle is construction materials. So another criteria to see where we are is the use of recycled material. So the Netherlands is very good in the use of recycled materials. I think we are world champion, especially in construction material. You see that more than 30% of all construction material we use, for instance, building houses or paving roads, 1/3 of that material is recycled. But it means that 2/3 is not yet recycled. So we have still a long way to go. So in spite of being the champion, as Mr. Dino Patijalal said, as Europe, we still have a long way to go. Well, Mrs. Moderator, sorry for talking lengthy, because I can go on this issue for a long time. Thank you very much for your very interesting question, and I wish you good luck with your own recycling efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Lambert and Zoltan, for that question. The next question will come from our online audience who is joining from Zoom. There's a question from Peace Generation Indonesia. May I encourage them to please open their mic and open their camera and state the question?
Okay, thanks for giving me a chance. My name is Multazam. I'm a coordinator of Chapter Sultan Facilitator in Peace Generation Indonesia. So Peace Generation Indonesia is a social enterprise on peace education, and we focus on peace education development training. So my question goes to Slovakia. Slovakia is ranked as one of the fastest growing developed economies in the world. So how do you balance the trajectory of your economic growth with your commitment to reducing emissions and protecting the planet? As you might know, Indonesia is grappling with the same question, although we are still developing our economy. Thank you.
It seems that we lost you a little bit there, so I received your question at the chat box. This is to Ambassador Yaroslav.
Okay, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for the question, which is really very relevant towards my country, because Slovakia belongs to one of the 3 most industrialized countries within the European Union. To start my answer to your question, I would say that the attention to the environmental impact of the industrialization can be divided into 2 periods in the history of my country. It was till 1990 and after that. And that after that period is mostly related to the accession and lately membership to the European Union, where we have adjusted our policies and practices to the standards which have been valid for the original members of the European Union, and we are benefiting currently out of that policies. Maybe the most transparent response to the question, how do we do with that necessity to reduce emission of the greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, is comparison to the GDP rate of Slovakia. So within the given period, starting from reference year of 1990, one can say that we have reduced the emission of our gases, which are emitted to the atmosphere, by more than 50%. On the other side, the GDP growth has actually exceeded over 60%, or comparing to the initial figures. So you can see just 2 opposite development in that direction. GDP is persistently growing, and the emission of the gases is persistently reduced. And as I have already said, as a member of the European Union, we are obliged to reach emission neutral position at the latest in the year 2050. So we have obliged that, and this is commitment on our part. How we did achieve those results, it's also a complex question and issue. One can say that a great deal of the answer is related to the transformation of the society, which actually has started in our case in early 90s. In that case, and specifically towards the industry, it meant either natural close down of the respective production sites, which generated lots of emission and other waste. On the other side, definitely it has been already at that time introduction of the new technologies which had been aimed towards reduction of the emission of the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. In recent years, definitely there are additional measures which are taken, as my colleague, Mr. Ambassador Lambert from the Netherlands said. Definitely taxation system and measures help quite a lot from the side of the government, but the attention is focused on reduction of the emission, especially in the energy sector, which is major emitter of the gases. In our case, over 70% of whatever gases we emit are generated by the energy sector. So that's the basic role for us to cope with that issue. Definitely the introduction of the renewable energy resources plays a very important role in that respect, though not everywhere those resources are available, but definitely we have to be creative in finding out the way how to do so. And hopefully, since that issue is very important for us, we can achieve new results in focusing on hydrogen power to be basis for our industry in a foreseeable future. So those are definitely the major elements of the effort on our side. As already been stressed, everybody is part of that business or enterprise, and we as individuals, either as consumers or let's say individual producers of the emission, have to fulfill our task. I mostly refer to the fact that back home, each household actually is a very important element of that effort, because households in our case generate over 20% of the emissions. So it is still quite sizable volume, and we have to do whatever is possible, either introduction new ways how to heat up in our case, because we are in that let's say altitude where we need to mostly focus on heating up during the winter season, comparing to you that we have to cool down the temperature in your houses all year long. So those have been basic points which I wanted to mention. Of course, I do hope that there can be also another new ways which are innovating, lots of new startups which are generating new ideas how to cope with the issue, are also playing a role, and especially in that respect, young people, young technicians play a very important role.
Thank you, Ambassador Jaroslav, for sharing the Slovakian experience. And I think that's a question that we're still grappling with also, how to balance economic priorities and environment priorities. But one thing we know is that policies that support the environment is actually better off in the long term for the planet. So the next question, I think there's an asker from Climate Science Indonesia. May I please welcome them to state the question?
Thank you. Respectful our ambassadors and all youth representatives. My name is Farah Sahila. I'm from Climate Science Indonesia. So Climate Science is a science-based organization and a movement for people who want to learn the better the better way to do climate action. My question is directed to Her Excellency Ms. Marina Berg. So Sweden is of course one of the leading countries of climate action. You're one of the first to implement carbon tax, have a zero net target by 2045, and you aim to be country with negative emission. My questions are, what's the secret sauce for the Swedish government in adopting forward-looking, ambitious, and progressive climate policies? And how do you mobilize the political will to do that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that very good question. And first of all, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, EU Delegation Ambassador Vincent, with colleagues who are arranging this and making this very important event to happen. First of all, I would like to state that we have to speed up the green transition. It is urgent. Climate change is the existential threat of our time, and we need to help each other to go through this. And European countries, we are here supporting Indonesia as much as we can. And yes, Sweden is undergoing a historic transition, I would like to say. It's not just that we have the ambition to make the country climate neutral by 2045, it's also that we are trying to shape our societies in a sustainable way, to shape our welfare sustainable. We are building and transforming cities into smart cities, smart city concepts, which means that every part of the society should be built on a sustainable way. And the Sustainable Development Goals are integrated into every single investment that we are doing. And of course, the Paris Agreement is leading. And what we see is, of course, there is a great political will to do this, but that doesn't come by itself. But I have to admit, and the truth is that there is no secret sauce and there is no quick fix. It's hard work. And the political will, it stems from the demands of the people, the demands of the society as a whole, and not least from the interaction between society, scientists, and the government, a continuous dialogue between these entities. And the Swedish climate policy is actually supported by a broad political ensemble, all political parties almost, within our parliament is supporting the government's climate policies. And the best thing of it all, I must say, is that the policies conducted by the government is also encouraged and improved by businesses, the business and private sector. There is a broad demand in Sweden by the people for actions. And the government do listen. And that is very important, to have this interaction between the society and the government, and not least the scientists. There is also an expectation from all parts of the society that Sweden should be in the forefront of transition to a more sustainable world for all, and to export our ideas and technologies to other countries and regions. It makes sense for the public, it makes sense for the individual consumer, and it makes sense for Swedish businesses. We make money out of the green transition. And I must say that being a proud Swede today, when I talk about green transition, because Sweden is a fine example of the fact that going green means richer. And sustainable means in itself being richer. It creates a positive economic growth, increased job creation, and improved innovation and know-how, all of which that we are happy to share with you. And the bottom line is resources need to be put into education and research to develop green technologies. And I think all of our European countries represented here today have fine green technologies to export. And we need to work, as I said, closely between government, the private sector, and the academia. And we need to work closely between countries and regions. The good part, the climate threat, when we talk about the climate threat, is that we can do something about it. We have the technology, it's just about implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Marina. Well, there's no secret sauce. Sweden has Greta Thunberg, so perhaps all of you can be the Greta Thunbergs of Indonesia. Can I please invite the next youth participant who would like to ask a question to the ambassadors?
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, and it's great honor for us to be here and have this opportunity. So my name is Tiara Aurelia Putri, and I'm from FPCI Chapter President University. And here, my question for Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia, Her Excellency Ina Lepel. So during the G7 summit in Aleman, it is said that Indonesia is among the countries that could receive new financing to transition to clean energy, called the Just Energy Transition Partnership, as part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment launched there. The question is, what are the updates or progress for this potential financing? So I think that's all for my question.
Thank you very much for that question. Is this working? Okay. Let me first of all say that despite the current global crisis and additional challenges that have been caused by Russia's war of aggression, Germany remains firmly committed to global reduction targets and also to the 100 billion climate financing targets of the Paris Agreement. We have therefore put climate change and energy transition at the heart of our G7 presidency. As industrial countries, the G7 will increase their efforts to decarbonize our electricity supply by 2035. However, the triple crisis that has been mentioned before cannot be solved by the G7 alone. And that's why the G7 plus other countries have also acknowledged our shared responsibility to support developing and emerging economies, including Indonesia, and accelerated their clean energy transitions. That's why at this point, several just energy transition partnerships are under negotiations with different lead nations. For Indonesia, the US and Japan are in the lead, supported by Germany as the current G7 presidency and by the UK as the outgoing COP26 chair. Indonesia has been a key partner for Germany in energy, climate, and environmental protection for many years already. We are taking a comprehensive approach to try to really tackle all the three planetary crisis issues. And this cooperation will become even more relevant as Indonesia embarks on a path of ambitious energy transition through the Just Energy Transition Partnership with the G7 and others. And that's why we have noted with great interest the enhancement of the NDC. As negotiations progress, and it's still very much work in progress, I'm confident that the partnership will address comprehensively all challenges Indonesia faces in this transition towards renewable energy, while at the same time making sure there is energy security and affordability. And let me also say, this is not just a matter of money. There have to be really good strategies for renewable energies for the country. There are some areas that are more suitable for one kind of renewable than others. There have to be solutions to transport energy from the place where it's produced to the place where it's needed. But there also have to be solutions for areas for whom coal has been the business model. And they need to redevelop business, they need to redevelop jobs. And Germany has experience in all these fields and is happy to share this kind of experience. We think that this partnership should focus on some points. We think that although it is not easy to do, coal phase out as soon as possible should be key by 2040 at the latest. This requires a regulatory framework with incentives for renewable energies. My colleague from the Netherlands has explained why this is so important. There is a plan needed for retiring maybe coal-fired power plants early, but also to reduce the pipeline of coal-fired power plants that are still in planning, because it would be really difficult to explain to taxpayers why we should maybe support early retirement of power stations if new ones are then coming online later. On the strategies for the renewables, I think massive investments will be needed. In order to achieve that, it cannot just be official development assistance, but investments are needed on a massive scale. For that, as I said, incentives are really, really needed. And in all this, Germany is ready to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ina. We at FPCI hope that the JETP deals will go successfully, and hopefully we can also help Indonesia support energy transition. May I invite the next asker from the youth group from Teens Go Green Indonesia? Hello.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the chance. My name is Harini Ambarwati. I'm from Teens Go Green Indonesia. Teens Go Green Indonesia is an organization, youth organization. We start our action in 2007 and acknowledged by legal entity association in Indonesia since 2020. So in the very first pandemic, we start our action again. And our goal is to spread the awareness about the environment. So in Bahasa Indonesia, we call it as virus cinta lingkungan. In English, it's like nature lover virus. So we would like to spread that spirit. And also our goal is would like to empower teenagers and also young people to start a green and also sustainable movement. And through education with edutainment concept. And I would like to ask question to His Excellency Mr. Frank Felix, Ambassador of Belgium to Indonesia. Last year there were floods in Limburg, Belgium, and also Germany. And this year also a large part of the summer was marked by extreme drought, and there were constant forest fires. Right, and I think the world is becoming more aware about what happened in this world, especially related to the environment. So we have to do our utmost effort to ensure a habitable environment. And spearheading to the Blue Leaders Group, which commit to the 30 by 30 initiative for the ocean, or to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. And what is Belgium's strategy to ensure that this vision is actually implemented? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your interesting question. And nice to hear that the Green Group is also going blue and talking about the oceans, because indeed our oceans are in danger for the moment. As a member of the Blue Leaders Alliance, we have a goal to limit the damaging activities in the oceans that are happening today and which are a bit out of any legal framework that exists. Why do we talk about 30% by 2030? That is because scientists tell us if we want to safeguard the vital functions of the oceans, we have to urgently protect fully 30% of these oceans. Your question is clearly what are we already doing and what are we trying to convince the world of in joining us. It's a bit technical, but we are, for a start, trying to finalize what we call the BBNG Treaty, which is the biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. It's a quite ambitious treaty that promotes this protection of this 30% by 2030. And as a number of colleagues here already said, that's within 8 years. So it's quite ambitious, but unfortunately we have no time to lose, and it absolutely has to be done. How do we do this? By working together with other governments, but not only other governments. We are working together with NGOs that are working on this field. There's the High Seas Alliance, for example, which promote dialogue with any member around the world. This is governments, other NGOs, but also the private sector. In 21, at the COP26 in Glasgow, as a Blue Leader, we signed the Blue Leaders Declaration to make as many countries as possible around the globe to join the Blue Leaders Alliance. And very recently, just 10 days ago, at the General Assembly of the UN in New York, we have again, a few members that joined us, the Netherlands next to me, but also Ecuador in Latin America. I said that governments and the civil society, it's important that they work together, but it's not enough. We need also the private sector on board. And we have seen recently specifically on the Blue Alliance that Bloomberg as an organization and Jeff Bezos, all known from Amazon, are joining now with quite big amounts the efforts. Maybe a few examples of what we have done in our own little region where we live. We live next to the North Sea, and that is one of the busiest marine environments in the world. There is shipping, fishing, sand extraction, nature conservation, windmill parks. So all these activities are taking place on a very small surface. And we try to reconcile all these activities to a way that they are not damaging anymore. We are also working together closely with the International Maritime Organization and took an initiative there to reduce the sulfur in marine fuels and to reduce CO2 emissions from shipping, which is quite damaging and often understated. And finally, we have a project that's called Fishing for Litter. This is to combat the amount of waste in the oceans. It was already mentioned that even here on the beaches, the beautiful beaches of Indonesia, you see so much waste. And that's a worldwide problem. So we have joined in with our own fishermen who have in 2021, and that's the small 80-kilometer coast that we have, it's uncomparable with what Indonesia is. But to give you an example, in 2021 alone, they brought 65 tons of rubbish ashore. And that's only what they got. So that's only a part of the real rubbish that can be found in the seas. And it testifies of the huge task we have ahead of us. But if we're all working together on it, I hope we can get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Frank. Can I please invite the next youth participant to state their question, and perhaps this time you can take off your mask so we can hear you clearly. From the jacket, I can tell this is Universitas Bakri?
Yes.
Correct.
This is University Bakri University. So,
can you please stand closer to the mic?
I'm sorry, I am a little bit, my runny nose. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Ramadan Dialkoni. I'm president of FPCI Chapter of Bakri University. FPCI Chapter is student body or student community that have been established in 30 universities across Indonesia. that focus to disseminate international issues in order to raise awareness toward global social problems such as climate change to grassroots and especially in our respective university. If I may, I would like to ask questions to Her Excellency Lila Karsey. I would like to ask about, I read about I read that Budapest, your capital, is home to a great circular economy. Initiatives such as the Climate KIC, which is the EU's largest public-private innovation partnership, focused on climate change through innovation to build zero carbon economy. Can you share with us some of the lessons learned from this initiative, and what strategy that Hungary or the EU employed to pioneer such a large-scale public-private partnership? It would be great if Indonesia could do the same and replicate the model to help the global goals to reducing the global temperature. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Welcome everyone, my dear colleagues, and also the students. I'm very glad to be here. Also, thank you for your question. I think it is very much relevant to not just talk about what is the issue or what we should do, but how we should do that. And also, once we have some ideas how we should do, then we should share the best practices or share the ideas among each other, and not limitedly within the EU, but also the whole world. So what you mentioned about this EIT Climate KIC, this is the European Union's main innovation initiative on climate change. This abbreviation of KIC stands for Knowledge and Innovation Community, which means we also we need to involve not just the people, the community, but also the private sector, the government, the academic stakeholders as well. And then we should put together what we have and then create something new and find out the solutions against the climate change. So this initiative is supported by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and it identifies and supports innovation that helps society mitigate and adapt to climate change. It supports mainly projects with high innovation potential and which can make a significant contribution to the climate change protection and the adaptation itself. The EIT Climate KIC brings together the partners in all around the world of the business, the academia, public and non-profit sector as well, to create networks of expertise, which will create the services, the products, and the systems that can be developed and brought to the market later on. So the hub that you mentioned in Budapest, it was founded in 2021, so it's quite new to make conclusion what are the lessons that we learned. However, for sure it has an aim, which is to intensify the knowledge sharing, business creation, acceleration, and innovation partnerships in the healthcare, in climate, urban mobility, and raw materials. So it is like a quite wide range of portfolio that we have. But for sure, it is not limited to the Hungarian companies, but the whole EU itself. As you asked about how, what is the strategy of Hungary itself, mostly we are focusing on, in our strategy, climate change, of course, and also clean water supply and sanitation. And as we are talking about PPP construction, we actually have a very good success story here in Indonesia that I believe also contributes very well to reach Indonesia's SDGs. In 2019, we built 36 water treatment plants here in Indonesia that provides for 500,000 Indonesian civilians clean water. So the project itself was from the Indonesian government, but a Hungarian company, a private company, was the one who built the water treatment, and it was financed by the government alone of Hungary. So I think it is a very good success story about how PPP can work very effectively and how we can contribute. Because as also my colleague Marina said, that we are here to help, we are here to share our good experiences, and for sure we can learn a lot as well about the challenges which are very different from ours, I believe, because of the climate, but we also have very similar issues that we might have to Indonesia or in the region as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lila. What an inspiring story of the success of PPP in Indonesia brought by Hungary. Can I invite the next youth participant to ask the question?
Good evening. My name is Giovanna Suida, and I am a head of journalism at We the Genesis, which is a youth-led community which works for youth empowerment, as well as to embed social responsibility, primarily through modern journalism. So the question I would like to ask is directed to the Ambassador of Denmark, Mr. Brixen. We know Russia's war in Ukraine has far-reaching implications on resources such as food and energy. With the knowledge that we aren't able to achieve global climate goals without everyone on board, in your opinion, how do we reach a net zero world considering the existing geopolitical divisions?
Thank you very much for your question. First, I would like to say that we have heard of the despair over the rising energy and food prices worldwide, and we acknowledge these concerns. But it's also important for us to stress that they are caused by the Russian aggression and not by the international sanctions. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a direct violation of the UN Charter. Russia is attempting to expand its own territory by force in breach of principles of territorial integrity, and it's an unprecedented threat not only to Europe, but also to international peace and security, and that's why we have to react. This is obviously tapping a great deal of our resources and political focus. However, this being said, we do not and cannot neglect other crises and global challenges of our time, with climate change being absolutely central. Denmark and Europe remain ambitious and are working hard to become climate neutral. The path to achieving the goal has changed, but our resolve remains despite the challenges we are facing in the short term. Actually, harnessing renewable energy is both a way to break free from Russian fossil fuel and also to become climate neutral. This requires cooperation and regional efforts. And a good example is the agreement at the Baltic Sea Energy Summit on the 30th of August in the so-called Marienborg Declaration. Here, EU countries around the Baltic Sea agreed to set combined ambitious visions for offshore wind in the region of at least 19.6 gigawatt by 2030, and that would be 7 times the current capacity. The countries also agreed to explore joint cross-border renewable energy projects and identify infrastructure needs. But we also need to work on the international level. And the Danish Prime Minister is one of the 6 champions in the UN Global Crisis Response Group, together with President Jokowi, that has to look at ways to address and coordinate global response to the consequences that has arisen due to the war. Also, climate solidarity means climate financing. As Denmark strives to reduce our own footprint, we have made major global commitments on climate adaptation and mitigation financing. Earlier this month, Denmark announced new 100 million Danish kroner to support climate adaptation and concrete activities to avert, minimize, and address climate-induced loss and damages. In total, Denmark aims to contribute at least 1% of the collective target of $100 billion, way above our relative share. Then also we are working together with Indonesia, where we have a strategic sector support program, and we also are a partner at the Just Energy Transition Partnership. Finally, we of course also work on accelerating the green transition at home to move away from the black energy delivered by Russia. This includes a plan to ensure green heat and phasing out of natural gas, more green power, and a green tax reform. We have also adopted a climate law which sets ambitious targets and has the objective of climate neutrality by 2050. So, in short, we continue our ambitious work to achieve a green transition despite of the geopolitical divisions. We cannot afford not to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perbrixen, and from the representative from We the Genesis. The next question will come from our audience who's tuning in from Zoom. There's a question from FPCI Chapter Universitas Islam Indonesia.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to the distinguished attendants, especially their excellencies ambassador and embassy official who attend the event. I am Muhammad Izamdu Sukma from FPCI Local Chapter Universitas Islam Indonesia, one of the local chapter based in Yogyakarta. I will transmit my question to the Honorable Deputy Head of Mission of France to Indonesia, Mr. Stephen Dover. France is a leader in international climate financing, and as one of the few countries who meet their fair share of a climate finance portion, is France also considering contributing to loss and damage funding to developing countries? Thank you.
What a challenging question. You maybe do not know, but this question of loss and damage has been quite of a question in the international community lately. And it generates some dynamic debates, let's say. But before entering into the answer, I will ask as a politician, even if I'm not one of them, by not answering the question to start with. You are right in your question to mention that France is a leader in international climate financing. France has made financing the fight against climate change a priority since COP21, and France supports climate finance involves major contribution to multilateral climate finance funds, amongst which we can take the example of the Green Climate Fund, GCF. Our contribution, I will not enter into many figures, but the French contribution is 1.5 million and 1.5 billion, and France has become Green Climate Fund's second largest contributor for the period 20 to 23. But overall, France has committed to increase its climate finance for developing countries from 3 billion in 2015 to 5 billion in 2020. And we have recently further extended this commitment, increasing it to 6 billion a year for the period from 2021 to 2025. Is that good? Yes. Congratulations, France. Is it enough? Certainly not. Our contributions are never enough to face the challenges. What are the goals? Let's get back to the goals. Let's first and foremost remind that financing climate mitigation is the first priority. Forgetting the causes to concentrate on the effects would be just like bailing water out of a boat with oars. Let me allow me to use a little bit of Indonesian to make it more clear. Even melupakan penyebabannya untuk fokus pada efeknya, seperti mencoba menggosongkan perahu penuh dengan air walaupun ada lubang di perahu. If we do not want to sink, if we don't want to drown, never forget the main way. And this way is mitigation. We have to examine any possible means to reduce our carbon emissions and to reach carbon neutrality. One more time, to prevent our Earth vessel to sink, we urgently need to stop damaging its hull. We have to do it right now and at the maximum pace, otherwise the loss and damage will reach a level nobody will be able to face anymore. So let's now get back to the question. None of us can ignore the sufferings induced by climate change. That's why, despite the necessity to give an absolute priority to mitigation, a third of France's climate finance for developing countries will be allocated specifically to adaptation measures. Loss and damage usually refers to the consequences of climate change that go beyond what people can adapt to. In the prospect of COP27 that is coming, France backs strongly two initiatives related to this crucial issue. The first one is a cruise initiative, Cruise for Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems, launched during COP21. So far, $100 million have been mobilized by 8 contributing states, and France has contributed at the level of 30 million. 74 countries have been covered. Cruise is becoming more and more ambitious with a target of mobilizing more fundings. France by itself will double its yearly contribution. And it has been recently announced during the last UN General Assembly. The second initiative is a project of global shield against climate risk, initiated by the German presidency of G7. During the G7 presidency, the shield gathers activity in the field of climate risk finance and preparedness together under one roof. This project is linked to contingency plans of developing countries. So those are two crucial initiatives that could be related to damage and loss. That being said, France will always remain committed to support countries facing natural disaster events and emergency situations. The recent devastating floods in North Pakistan, which has affected 33 million people, is an example of what future climate change crises will look like. So we are very committed to help the population of Pakistan in this very difficult situation related to climate change. Another example, which is not exactly related to climate crisis, but is still an example of France's commitment to disaster relief, is better known in Indonesia. It has been about the 2018 earthquake in the Palu Bay here in Indonesia. Through its French development agency known as AFD, France has granted 1 million euros to support recovery and resilience of affected coastal community. To conclude that with a less technical and technocratical kind of approach, let's say that I am absolutely ecstatic and enthusiastic to be in front of you today. Why? because, as the Swedish ambassador mentioned, I am quite convinced that the importance of the community, the importance of the youth, the importance of any kind of populations to get involved into fight against climate change will help our government, will help our companies, private companies, to get better committed and to get better results. Without you, youth, without you, young intellectual, we will never get anywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stefan. Okay, we have come to the end of our discussion, and we have one last question. Perhaps I can invite them to state the question.
Hello, afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity for me to ask. And then I am Alfie as the head of external relation of IMPLI. IMPLI stands for in Indonesia is Ikatan Mahasiswa Teknik Lingkungan Indonesia. It's basically the association of environmental engineering students from all over Indonesia. So, hello everyone. Okay, I would like to raise a question to Mr. Diego as the deputy head of mission of Spain to Indonesia. So what I would like to ask is, what is Spain's experience in ensuring a just energy transition? Because I heard that Spain announced an environmental policy that will end fossil fuels reliance and move to 100% renewables by 2050. As Indonesia is also learning about energy transition, what can we learn from Spain's experience in involving local communities from that? Thank you so much.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih banyak pertanyaan kamu, Ibu Alfie. Thank you very much for your question. It's very pertinent, and you have touched upon many concepts that the ambassador have already expressed. You said energy transition. Okay, it has been mentioned. Many concepts have been mentioned, as was announced when we started by Ambassador Piqué. You said one word that is very important: just energy transition. So the adjective in this case is the most important word of your question, I guess. And at the end, you mentioned the other part, communities. So I will try to, share the experience. Yours is also interesting, so that's something that I'm afraid we are all learning in this moment, because your question is very pertinent. This is one of the last concepts. And this is the first idea that I want to give you. We have both concepts and policies, and both are intertwined in this case. It has been a process, like here, of many years discussing within governments, administrations. And the first is all you see here for all the students. This is very important for the idea that we all Europeans discuss already for decades. Most of us, me included, were very young when this was already a debate starting to be built, and now we have strong concepts and we advance. So that's why now you can ask a question that I can understand very easily why just in the question. Objectives is what policy does. So that's what has been built. It's just a national experience. We are, of course, proud of the Spain's national experience, but it's just one of them. As Europeans, we all share common goals that in the end became common policies. After some decades, we had these great global targets, and you mentioned, well, where every country goes. Spain has decided to go for what you mentioned. I will explain these targets that are, numbers that have to be followed by all of us, commitments. So first you have to decide on the concepts, and then the policy, and then you decide all that. And it's always science-based, as many ambassadors have mentioned. It's long-term. You said 2050. sorry, because say, okay, the reference is 2030. Of course, we all have targets for the next 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, but it's already a very good framework that we can already devise something that was very difficult during previous years to say, okay, in 2050, we want 100%. It's no longer a discussion on the basis of having some targets that were very difficult to calculate even. This science-based approach is set on the objectives that you mentioned. It's 100% renewables by 2050. It's in the electricity sector. In the energy mix as a whole, it's 90%, but it's already a lot. That reflects. I have many figures. I'm not going to tell them because you can all imagine we have all the decarbonization, electricity mixed with gas, the whole energy mix and the decarbonization objectives. Well, this is reflected in instruments, portrayed in instruments after long negotiations. Most of them take place at the level of the European Union because it's a common policy. We share goals, so we reflect it in broad policies that are watered down to national objectives. First, we have institutions. Perhaps sometimes, as we have here, the representative of the Indonesian ministry, it's very important to have those institutions. You are here now representing this because you are all mentioned, okay, so I'm from this NGO, private enterprise, or university students. That's already the first step. So we get together and discuss about this. Not only among countries, but within the society. You build institutions, official institutions, so we have now a ministry for ecological transition. Then you have laws. Okay, you have these international targets. You have to, well, again, reflected in national objectives. We have this ecological transition bill that it's already dealing with just energy transition. Then you have the strategy. So, okay, so what do we want to do by just energy transition? You mentioned the word at the end of your question, communities. Well, every country knows about its energy mix, social structure. I can more or less explain the experience of Spain. We had a history of energy resources. We dealt with them for a long time. We have people who work on that, and this is the transition. These people have to change jobs. These people have to adapt to new technologies. And it has been mentioned by the Swedish ambassador. This search for technology is what changes everything, because it can turn the argument into a positive one. This technology is good for the economy. This technology is good for employment, but it needs a transition. So that's what's in the strategy, to help those who would have to change in the labor market, to adapt to this transition and have new employment, new economic opportunities to get to them. How do you make it? With good public policies, with good design, and with investment, which was mentioned by the Danish ambassador. You need both investment and technology, and in the end, you end up with this design of a very good policy. It can be shared internationally, not only by us discussing it here, not only by seeing, well, I count more or less like 15 universities just here, and I guess many more online, not only by this discussion, but having international programs. Just this year, in 2022, Spain signed the program for the clean energy transitions in the International Energy Agency. It's a program to share all these concepts to go beyond, as was mentioned by the French representative. For many years, we developed this mitigation, adaptation, all those concepts, not now going to the transition. So that's where really thank you very much for the question. The next step is just a policy. It's to be just, but you need all that I mentioned. It will take many years. That's why the reference is 2050, because you need to adapt a whole generation of people to this new environment in the sense of the economy that has to be developed. But apparently it can be reached because apparently most of us are worried about it. That's why I come back to the beginning. Really, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the concepts. It was very well articulated. And I'm happy, as last colleagues said, that you are all part of a global community that is very well represented. And as a foreigner representing his country here, it's really, I'm really proud to see you not only here, but also online. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Diego. So we are at the end of our discussion, but there's one burning question in the Zoom chat, and I'd like to pose this to any of the ambassadors who'd like to answer it. The question comes from Yoshe Angela. Dear EU representatives, first of all, thank you for such an insightful speech and dialogues. As one of the youths in Indonesia, it made me curious. The Climate Diplomacy Week event can be seen as an effort to raise climate awareness in Indonesia. However, what do you want to see we do? Because our climate crisis is supposed to be tackled from top-down approaches, I really hope that you could give us an explanation. So any of the ambassadors or excellencies who would like to tackle this question, you can go to the mic. Yeah, I'll be happy to. So I think Goche is trying to understand what more can she do as a grassroots to tackle this climate change? Because the understanding has been that climate change is something that the government should do, and it requires a top-down approach. Yeah, Ambassador Marina. There we go.
First of all, thank you. That was a very clever question. So what can you do? Let me be very honest that everyone can actually do something, not just youth, but you are very important. I think what you should focus on is that you should not feel that you are trapped or captured by the threats and the awful pictures that we are painting and describing, because you can be agents for change in the way you are living your life. We were talking about consumption, we were talking about production. I mean, it goes hand in hand. If you want to consume, the production has to increase. So, and make sure that you choose the right products, that you choose products being green, produced greenly or produced in a sustainable way. And also you need to join forces. Young people should not be seen, as I said, as victims of climate change. You are valuable contributors in the way that you act. You are agents for change, as I said, and try to be your own entrepreneurs and think as innovators. Because we all have to be innovative in our thinking and change our mindset about how we act and how we live our lives. And as I also mentioned before in my earlier answer, is that education is also very important for everyone, and inform everyone and spread your competences. And science and technology is so important, and governments should listen to you, students, and young people that are educated and well informed. You can scale up your efforts by joining forces. I know that, coming back to Greta Thunberg, I have to mention her as well. Fridays for Future is a movement going on globally, and there is a branch here in Indonesia that is growing, and I'm really happy to see that, and join forces globally.
Thank you. Can we give an applause for the ambassador? So for the past 1.5 hours, we have held young people here asking the ambassadors questions. So perhaps now I'd like to turn to the ambassador to ask the last question to the young participant. Perhaps Ambassador Vincent, you'd like to ask Emma a question?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, good. Now, basically, the question is to turn the table around and to ask you what can we do for you? How can we help you do your work and increase your advocacy and strengthen your movement and expand the voice of young people?
Hi again, and thank you for the question. Your Excellency, Ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia, Mr. Vincent
Pickett for the question. I'll quickly introduce myself again. My name is Nimbade Emabati. I am an aspiring youth climate activist. Quite interesting, actually. Ambassador of Sweden. I was a part of Fridays for Future Youth for Indonesia, as well as Fridays for Future Digital. So that was quite interesting to hear your answer. I've been working with climate change activism for about 4 years now, since I was 14, and this particular question comes up quite frequently. And I always answer it in different contexts at different times in different ways. But I always look at how I personally believe that awareness and education are the key ways in which we can mobilize youth towards climate activism. We are currently living in a society or in a world where teachers are constantly trying to create global leaders. We always hear the words of, we're teaching you to create global leaders. However, I personally, as a year 12 student, fail to see how we are creating a world of global leaders that actually understand comprehensively that climate change is one of, if not the most urgent and significant time-pressing issues right now globally. If we're not teaching climate change the way it should be taught, to create an overall communal understanding as to what it is, what it means, what it impacts, what are the reasons, we're not allowing our youth to even tap into their potential as to who we can become, inspire, and grow as global climate change leaders. It starts with our schools. Our parents are frankly not able to teach us the information that is critical to tackling climate change. They're from a different era, one of which contributed to climate change, the depletion of our world's resources, and as my mom calls it, the throwaway society, which promotes consumerism and created extreme amounts of waste. Our schools and communities must have to teach the truth. There are a lot of things that world leaders disagree on, but I think that one thing that we can all agree that almost everyone agrees on is that all youth must be and should be attending schools. And so I believe that we need to make an overall anonymous agreement that climate change should be taught in schools the way that everyone agrees that math should be taught in schools, the way that everyone agrees that English and humanities and sciences should also be taught in schools. Students will care if we teach them to care. Education needs to engage students to critically think about the world in which they live. Rote education, where we simply recall information and write it down, keeps us dull, bored, and unknowing. One example of this simplified version of teaching climate change is the fact that we use the word climate change as opposed to global warming, where many leaders believe and teachers don't use global warming because it's overwhelming and it's intimidating, the term global warming. Education of our youth about the climate change is key to changing the world. We need to advance curriculums to include climate change knowledge on various levels. And by this, I mean expanding beyond simply teaching students what is climate change and the science behind climate change. And we don't need to memorize definitions and recite them on tests because, frankly, I believe that that's useless. We need to integrate climate change across all disciplines and teach students things such as debating about solutions, researching, and ranking reasons for climate change. We need to show students examples of locally relevant practical solutions to various climate change issues relevant to their own lives and those of our communities, specifically in Jakarta, the way in which flooding impacts us. It is a proven fact that students who become global citizens through education at a young age tend to stay politically active throughout their whole lives. Students need to get involved and actively work at climate change solutions in school. They need to see local solutions in action and become a part of such movements through social activism at school. Educated students who become climate activists are students who are typically think critically about the world, and that's why I believe we need to implement it into our education. They understand the connections between things such as poverty and inequality and climate change and greed and the ways in which they all intertwine. So how can we mobilize students and our youth? I first and foremost believe that we must educate them about the world and about climate change issues, and we need to provide them with the information they need to critically think, and not only that, but to care. We want to find solutions, and therefore we need to actually offer them the opportunities to participate in activism at a young age, so then they can grow to become politically active adults who will work to save the world. This is a solution as well that is not financially difficult to achieve the way many solutions are. Though there are obstacles specifically regarding students who may not be privileged enough to attend schools, I think it is the best and the first step to mobilizing our youth to tackle climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma, for that passionate remarks, I would say. Ambassador Leela here just flagged me saying that she wants to ask you a question. So very quickly, because I am aware I'm standing between you and your dinner. So Ambassador.
Sorry, actually, it's not a question. Okay. But wow, I'm very thrilled. I think all of us actually, because you were mentioning so much education, I think I can talk on behalf of everyone that I really recommend all of you. What you can actually do is to go abroad, study abroad. We have great scholarship, full coverage scholarship in the EU. We have Study in Europe event you can learn a lot about, and not just about the major that you would go and study, but also just to visit our countries, and you can see like you are walking with open eyes, and you can see what we are actually doing on a community level and real life level. So I would definitely recommend all of you and check all the embassies. We have great programs. In Hungary we have, but I'm sure that all my colleagues can give you some great examples. So that is what I would encourage, since you mentioned so much education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma and Ambassador Leela, for that final remark. With that, let me end this panel session. Thank you so much for everybody and their questions. But most of all, thank you to the ambassadors. Thank you to Ambassador Lambert, who have left earlier, to Ambassador Frank Felix, Ambassador Ina, Ambassador Leela, Ambassador Yaroslav, Mr. Per Brixen, Mr. Diego, Mr. Stefan, and then Ambassador Marina, and of course, our host today, Ambassador Vincent Piquet. Please give them a round of applause. We care about their future, and we know that you care about our climate and our planet. So let me just encourage you one more time to join forces, as Ambassador Marina said, fight for a net zero future that is not far too long, because then we know it's a threat to all of our humanity. So thank you so much for joining us today. And let me close this. Thank you so much. I've been so honored. One more time. You want to mention something? Thank you so much.
Okay. Because I wanted to thank FPCI for bringing us together tonight, Pagdino, of course, but also the fantastic moderator we had today, Esther, whom we have got to know quite well in the course of this week and even before. And lastly, thank you very much, dear young people of Indonesia. Carry on, we support you, and we'll work together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Excellencies and youth panelists, for the lively discussions. Ambassadors and moderator, please kindly stand up and move across the table for our photo session. Okay. Ambassadors and moderator, please kindly proceed to the floor for another photo session with all participants. To all participants, may I ask all of you to stand up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the distinguished delegates and participants. For all the participants, please remember to fill out the post-event survey at the link presented on the screen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for the participation this evening. Please enjoy your dinner and hope to see you again at the EU Climate Diplomacy Week 2023. To Ambassador Finson, please kindly stay for media doorstop. For the fellow ambassadors, you may have your dinner at the right section of the room. Thank you so much and see you next year.